Coaches across the country used the Coachpad this past season to be more efficient with their scout card prep on the weekends as well as when out on the practice field working with their scout teams. Whether you're a coach using a computer program to create cards or drawing them by hand, the Coachpad is for you. Never printing paper or stuffing a binder, clearly seeing scout cards outdoors in the bright sun, and using the Coachpad on game days, syncing diagrams from the press box to the sideline were some of the features coaches enjoyed this season. This offseason, get your Coachpad at thecoachpad.com to get your program ready for next season. Thecoachpad.com.
Welcome back to another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast. Today we have a fantastic guest, recently retired high school and college football coach, Bob Debesse. Coach, how you doing?
Great. Appreciate you having me, man.
No, I appreciate you coming on. Like I said, I understand it's a busy time. Season ended, entering retirement, grandkids, all that jazz. So it's a busy time of year, especially getting prepped for the holidays. For some reason, if somebody doesn't know who you are and has lived under a rug or a mat or a loft for the past 10 years, do you want to just, explain kind of your coaching career and kind of where you just finished up at?
Sure. First off, I was inspired to go into coaching by my high school coach. Really, when I started off, that's who I wanted to be. I wanted to be Oscar Cripps, my high school coach. I went to school in Houston, Texas, Stratford High School, Houston, Texas High School. Went on to Southwest Texas, which is now Texas State, from there. If I wasn't sure that I was going into coaching in college, I became real sure. I played for a guy named Jim Wacker, who was one of the most positive, enthusiastic, encouraging guys I've ever been around. And between Oscar and him, the thing that impressed me so much was just how good they made everybody feel. The fifth string tackle felt just as important as the star quarterback, and I wanted to do that. So I thought I was going to high school. I thought that was going to be my, way into coaching. And through a real strange twist of fate, at 23 years old, I was coaching quarterbacks in the old Southwest Conference at TCU, and stayed there for 9 years. And then we went on to the University of Minnesota for 5 years, and then I came back as the head football coach at my alma mater, Texas State, for 6 years. Back to the Big Ten to Purdue, to Texas A&M, and then I had my first experience in high school. We got let go at A&M after the 2007 season, and I stayed there in College Station, at the local high school. Our son was a freshman at that time. Our girls were in college, and Janet and I just decided that we needed to give him some roots. We hadn't been, the family hadn't moved from West Lafayette, Indiana, Purdue, but like 18 months prior. So I spent 2 years there, and then crazy, because I didn't know Willie Fritz. I interviewed for the offensive coordinator job at Sam Houston State. Got it. And we had two fun years there. Went to New Mexico for 6 years, 3 years at Georgia Southern after that. Then I ended up at Grapevine High School, which, the family drove that decision too. We were starting to expand as far as grandkids were concerned. And we wanted to get back to Texas with family. And so I landed at Grapevine High School and was wide receiver coach my first year, offensive coordinator my second, and been head coach the last 2 years. So very gratifying, unbelievably gratifying experience, as far as coaching is concerned. Just a fantastic ride. I've been so lucky. But to end it at Grapevine, really, something that was completely unexpected. I never would have guessed I would have ended as a head Texas high school coach, and that might be the greatest honor of my professional career, to be honest with you.
No, I agree. Like I lived in Texas for 6 years.
Okay. What part?
San Antonio area. So I was at
Yeah.
New Braunfels and Judson school districts from
Yeah, you bet.
4 through 8. So
Yeah.
my mom moved back down there after I graduated college. She lives in Spring Branch in between San Marcos and New Braunfels.
Yeah, right.
So beautiful area. Like I said,
Absolutely. One of my favorites.
down
Yeah.
there this summer. So,
Yeah, I recruited when I was in college for the 36 years, probably 33 of those years. That was my recruiting area there.
oh yeah, no, I love it
Yeah.
looks completely different than it did 10 years ago.
Yeah, oh, no doubt. Yeah.
The growth has been
Oh, it's phenomenal. You can't tell where Austin stops and San Antonio starts now.
right. It's yeah. It doesn't. I tell my mom that every time I go back down there. It looks not remotely the same.
No, we're going this weekend to Texas State for their game. It's a Letterman's reunion weekend, and I'm anxious to get back. I hadn't been back for a while, so I'm anxious to check it out.
Good. That's awesome, Coach. Seriously. Now, you speaking of college football, I mean, you are very well known for your offenses. I mean, I don't think that's a secret. My question is, over the course of your career, how did you evolve, and what caused you to evolve? Because obviously, you span 42 years.
Yeah,
football naturally evolves, but like, I mean, I'm assuming your philosophy probably evolved. Plays you relied on evolved. How did you evolve over the course of those 42 years offensively?
Sure. Well, I cut my teeth with Coach Wacker at Southwest Texas in a graduate assistant role, and then full time at TCU, running the split back veer, and that was back in the 80s, you know. And Bill Yeoman at the University of Houston was really the expert, or the known expert in college football at that time. But Jim, you know, he was at Houston every chance that he could get until we got in the Southwest Conference and we played him. So I had an option background, and then probably about 1989, I guess 1988, it became apparent that the option game was hurting us from a recruiting standpoint, you know, which happens, right? I mean, it happens with skilled kids, and backs want to be the feature back and all that kind of stuff. So we made a complete switch. I mean, really a big time switch, and kind of went to Dennis Erickson's one back empty offense. That was kind of the rage back then. Made a lot of visits to Washington State when he was there. Went to the University of Miami when he was there. And so when I became coordinator at TCU in 1990, that's what we were doing, and that's what we were. You know, it's crazy because I ended my career trying to find a way to get more backs in the backfield. When I was coordinator at TCU on through Minnesota, hell, we were trying to find ways to get the backs out of the backfield. You know, it was basketball on grass back then, and so, you know, really it was. I guess early on it was the veer because it was Jim's offense. Then it was Dennis Erickson's offense because that was kind of in vogue. Not a lot of people were doing it, but there was enough doing it to where it was pretty popular. We actually, at the University of Minnesota, and Gary Barnett, when he was at Northwestern University, we actually came in at the same time. And we both kind of introduced the no back, spread them out offenses to the Big Ten. Now, Drew Brees came in to Purdue a few years after we left Minnesota, and of course they get, rightfully so, a lot of credit for taking it to another level, if that makes sense. Yes. And then I went to Southwest Texas, then it was still Southwest Texas as the head football coach. Didn't quite have the personnel to do that, but we did a little bit, but kind of dabbled in. We were still in one back, too tight, you know, heavy play action, just because that's, you know, that fit our personnel. And I think I should have backed up and I said, you know, I don't think it's very smart to say as a coach, this is what I do, therefore this is what we are going to do. I think that's crazy because, you know, I've seen too many coaches do that and try to fit a round hole, a round peg into a square hole. You got to figure out what your kids can do, right? And so that's kind of, as we fast forward, you know, I went back to Purdue as an assistant, got more exposure to the quick game. They were masters at it, you know, when Coach Tiller was there. A&M went back with Dennis Francione, got a little more exposure to the option. Okay. And then all of a sudden the Sam Houston thing comes along, and that's where it kind of comes full circle, because I interviewed with Coach Fritz, and I interviewed on two tights, one back, inside zone, outside zone, heavy play action, Peyton Manning, Indianapolis Colts. And we were going to be smash mouth, and we were going to, well, I got the job on that, but then we get into spring and it's like, we ain't got the people to do this. And we were hurting a little bit. We were hurting a little bit in the offensive line, had some good running backs, but hurting a little bit in the offensive line, a little suspect at quarterback. So in order to at least try to move the football in the spring against our defense, we went to what do you do when you can't block them? You read them, right?
Mm-hmm.
You read them and you option, right? And so, Kaepernick was at Nevada. They had just kind of recently come out with the pistol, right? They had just recently come out with the pistol and the zone read out of the pistol. And not many people had the guts to do it. Not many people thought they had the people to do it. Well, we knew we had to be different. We knew we had to be different at Sam Houston. We couldn't be like everybody else. We didn't quite have the skilled kids to spread them out and throw it. And so we went to the zone read. And then we said, well, you know what? If we're gonna run the zone read, we got to have a way to hold that outside linebacker, force defender out there. So let's just bring the pitch back around in orbit motion and send them out there like we're going to pitch it, and maybe it'll entertain them for a little bit, and we can make 4 yards with the quarterback. And then we said, well, you know what? If we're going to do that, why don't we try the option? And so I'm not saying we were the first, because I think that's scary. I cringe every time a coach says, I invented this. Everything's been done before.
Yes.
Right. Everything's been done before. We all steal from each other and copy each other. Well, we did make the decision that we were going to try to make the zone read, complement the zone read with the zone read option, and actually triple read it. And so it was a little bit different at the time. There weren't a whole lot. I don't know that anybody was doing it. Maybe they were, but I didn't know about them. We studied Nevada a lot, just for blocking schemes, backfield mechanics, things like that. But we kind of came up with our own deal when it came to the triple, as far as the blocking scheme was concerned with the offensive line. If you can picture. Do you mind me just keep rambling here?
You keep going. I'm loving this. You go, Coach. I'm not going to stop you at all. You go.
If you can picture running the zone read, and everybody takes the read side tackle and they inside release and they put him up on the second level, and he's supposed to block that read side inside linebacker, right? Okay.
Yes.
Well, how many times have you seen, because that read side inside linebacker is a better athlete, he takes an inside step, tackle falls for it, and then he scrapes and he makes a play, right? I mean, it happens all the time. So we got sick and tired of seeing that. And so we kind of came up with an inside zone scheme where if you're going to run the triple, then you're going to see a lot of squeeze and scrape, or you're going to see a lot of feathering with the end and the backer stepping up. Okay, well, if that's the case, we can run inside zone the same way and just have the tight end, who's responsible for backside C gap, have the tight end block the C gap threat and let the other guy go. Because he's got to be, he's seeing pitch, he's seeing triple presentation, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Well, what that allowed us to do was push all the combos one past the identification of the Mike backer. So now, instead of having your read side tackle trying to block that read side inside backer, now he can push all the way to the Mike.
Yeah.
And we've got a play side lineman, wherever the combos are, that pushes to the force defender or the replacement player, the cutback player, to the play side. So that was totally different. Nobody was really doing that. And the reason that we were able to do it was because we weren't just running inside zone. We were running triple, and we were running inside zone with triple presentation most of the time.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. And on the triple, it became easy because now that tight end, okay, that what we call the cruiser, who I consider to be the most important player on offense after the quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
That cruiser had to see things exactly the way the quarterback did as far as the reads were concerned. If he saw a skating, widening defensive end or an upfield end, he knew it was going to be a give. So he was going to insert inside that read key to block the backer, right? Gap integrity says there's got to be a backer in there. If he saw squeeze, he knew it was going to be scrape. And so he would read it just as the quarterback. He would bypass the squeeze, knowing that the quarterback was going to pull it off of him. And he would end up securing the box or cruising the box to allow the quarterback to get out to the perimeter. And so, honest to God, we just kind of stumbled on that. Now, again, it makes sense as far as triple rules are concerned. But from the zone read option where the line's going one way and the backfield's going the other, it was different. Okay, it was different. And the results in 2011 at Sam Houston, which is really, we kind of worked on this in the spring of 2011, and kind of put it all together. And the results in 2011 bear it out. I mean, we had really good kids now. We had some really talented kids, but we were doing something completely different. People hadn't defended it before. And, we went all the way to the national championship, went 14-0, and North Dakota State beat us for their first of 9 or 8, whatever it was.
Whatever C number it is.
Yeah, whatever it was. But so that's how it started. We just, like I said, we didn't go in intending to do that, but it took off like wildfire, man. And the kids, it was so much fun to run because it was different, because we were having success, because there's so much window dressing. There's so many things you can do. Play action, just like any triple option, can be deadly. And it was that first year. And then we went to the University of New Mexico, installed the same thing. That's a tough job. Mendenhall's doing a phenomenal job there right now. That is a tough job. But Coach Bob Davie, the guy I work for, he was scarred for life, having been the head coach at Notre Dame and playing the academies every year.
Yeah.
He was scarred for life with the triple option. So he knew he wanted to run triple, but he didn't think at a state institution you could recruit to underneath center triple.
Yeah.
Pretty smart. And so we happened to be doing what we were doing at Sam Houston. We beat New Mexico in 2011. The head coach was let go. Coach gets the job. That leads to me getting the job. And had some fantastic years there. Led the nation in rushing in 2016 and won their first bowl there in forever. And then went to Georgia Southern, which is one of the, I'm not going to say the birthplaces, but it's, if there's a place they love option football, it's Statesboro, Georgia. And it was just a natural fit there as well. Ironically, the guy I worked for at Georgia Southern, Chad Lunsford, had worked for Willie Fritz at Georgia Southern. And so we had that connection. Chad was familiar with triple. That's what he wanted to do. So I know that's a long story, but that's how I evolved. It was still making the decision to go to triple. It was still based on what could our kids do, and what couldn't they do. It wasn't just this is, we're going to fit this too tight, one back Indianapolis Colts style hard nosed offense, and we're going to fit it and we're going to run it no matter what. That wasn't it at all. And so, and the other thing that was interesting is at Sam Houston with Willie Fritz, at New Mexico with Bob Davie, I worked for 2 defensive coaches. And we were of exactly the same philosophy as far as not just the triple, but huddling up, taking as much time on the clock as possible, keeping their offense off the field, our defense off the field, protecting our defense as much as we could. I still think that's, I still think that's a winning formula. I think it's a winning formula when you look at the end of the season, how teams operate. And the same thing was true, even though Chad was an offensive guy, the same thing was true when we went to Georgia Southern. So that helped us as far as credibility and in installing the offense when it wasn't a real popular thing to do. It's not a sexy thing to do to run triple option.
Now, question, how much of that were you able to take down the grapevine? Like, because again, obviously college, you have that. Now, Texas, you get
Yep.
more time than other states, but
Sure.
it's still different in terms of time management and
Oh, yeah.
athletes and a lot of it. How much
Sure.
of that did you still try to run at Grapevine? And because again, I watched a little bit of your film, I could see some of the inside zone triple stuff.
Yeah.
But how much were you actually did you actually bring down, and how much did you modify for high school kids?
Okay, so everything starts with the inside zone, and that's always that's our identity play. Okay. And so it always starts with the inside zone, and the inside zone being run out of as many personnel groupings and pre-snap presentations as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And so we ran inside zone off of the zone read look. And then after that, the next most run play has always been the triple. Okay. So 2021 is inside zone, 30-31 is triple off of the inside zone look. High school, the next most run play or the next most called play really became power. Okay. And the reason it became power was because it was enough to try from a practice standpoint to make sure that we were precise in running the triple. To add more elements of option or offshoots of the 30-31 probably wasn't going to be a great idea, right? Probably would have watered it down. So with the power, you can still sell the triple with the orbit motion and the two back. You know, it looks like triple with what the pitch back is doing. But power gives you a good hard nose play that you can carry into any game. It's a great 4-minute red zone, all that kind of stuff. If there was another element of option, it was going to be speed option. Everything, I shouldn't say everything changed. Speed option became a little tougher to run when the NCAA, of course, you know, I'm speaking of Texas, right? Because Texas goes by NCAA rules. When they made cutting tougher,
Yeah.
That made speed option a little bit tougher. Still ran it, you know, still ran it every year. But it was a little bit tougher. So my first year, I was wide receiver coach. We ran air raid. Guy I was working for at the time knew that we had to make a change, knew that we didn't have those kind of people coming up, but we did have some running backs that were pretty good. So I got the offensive coordinator job. That's kind of how we installed it. 2022 was my first year as OC. That was our most talented team in the 4 years that I've been at Grapevine.
Mm-hmm.
Best offensive line, best stable of running backs. Never really had a quarterback that just like took to the option that was, you know, a natural. But we've had guys that have been very adequate, if that makes sense. Okay. We had guys that could get us first downs, weren't going to maybe, you know, get us the explosive plays I've been used to in college. And the big thing is, and I think this is so critical when you start talking about being at places where you might be a little bit behind from a personnel standpoint compared to your competition. I think the big thing with the option is every Sunday, every Saturday or Sunday, whatever, defensive coordinators have to stop and say, all right, we got to throw everything out the window because we got to make everything sound for dive quarterback pitch. Okay. And getting scout teams, whether it be college or high school, getting scout teams to simulate triple option is next to impossible.
Yes.
So if we're practicing at the pace we should be practicing at, which is fast, which is precise. I use the word precise a lot on the practice field. If we're practicing precise, we should play faster come game day than what our opponent can defend us. And so just the fact that defenses have to stop, you know, most offenses, what are they doing? They're running spread. Well, that's easy for scout teams to simulate spread because that's what those kids do every day. Mm-hmm. Now you take a spread team and say, okay, we're going to put 3 backs in the backfield and you're going to be a quarterback and you're going to ride and read and you're going to pitch the ball and we're going to do it really, really fast. You know, it's hard. I mean, it's hard for defenses. So I think that's a huge, huge, huge advantage when it comes to preparing. and giving yourself a chance to be successful against better competition. You know, if you look at the academies, Army's obviously having a great year. But the last several years, Army has been an independent.
Mm-hmm.
Navy's been in the league, the American Conference. Air Force obviously has been in the Mountain West for a long time. When you're in a conference, you play the same defensive coordinator sometimes 4 or 5 years in a row. Well, they get to having a beat on you, right? They get to start figuring you out. Army, when you're an independent, you can play 12 different people every year, if that makes sense. Okay. So that just enhances your chances of being successful because people haven't defended you. And so I just think that part of it, I think people look at the triple and they say it's high risk. It ain't high risk. Okay. It's high risk if you don't practice it properly. I want to tell you something. Our first year at Georgia Southern, we still, to this day, we hold the NCAA record for least amount of turnovers in a season. We had 5. No picks, and we had 5 fumbles. 2 of those fumbles were by starters. 3 were by backups in mop-up roles. So it is not a high risk. In 2011, we played for the national championship. We played 15 games. We had 13 turnovers in 15 games. So it's not a high risk offense. It's very much a high reward offense. You just gotta do a great job of emphasizing precision and ball security.
You mentioned practice there because I think that's, again, I've done this for 14 years now. So I at this point, I don't care what offense or defense you're running, but if you don't know how to teach it or how to practice it, it doesn't matter. I mean, just being honest, like obviously fit it to your kids, but I mean, you can know the air raid or the inner center triple all you want, but if you don't know how to practice it and teach it to kids, it doesn't matter.
Right.
How do you approach it? Practice? I mean, what does a typical offensive practice look like for you? I mean, because you mentioned right there, I mean, 5 turnovers in 12 plus games is an impressive feat.
Yeah.
You don't care what offense you run.
Right. Well, okay. Let me go back to let me give credit where credit's due. Also, the two places that I just mentioned, Sam Houston in 2011, and then Georgia Southern, where we still had a heavy Willie Fritz influence, right? So Willie has his plan to win. I'm sure you've heard about his plan to win. It's tried and true. It's phenomenal. And the first one is turnover takeaway margin. And so we took ball security in practice, or he took ball security in practice to a new level. There was never an excuse for a lack of ball security. So, for example, you never threw a ball to a coach. You know, you might have been a running back and you just broke a run for 15 yards and you're going back. You never threw. You always handed the ball. You always had great ball security up until the end, and you handed the ball. We always handed the ball to the officials. You know, coaches went ballistic, led by the head coach, when the ball was on the ground, when there was a lack of ball security. There were short, spurts of discipline right then and there, for ball security. So it was a mindset, and it was something that everybody bought into. And so some type of ball security drill was always a part of practice. It doesn't have to always be against the defense. It can be just, emphasizing technique on the mesh. I'll tell you a big one, teaching offensive players how to recover a fumble. And when you do that, don't have wide receivers looking at you as the coach who's throwing the ball on the ground, simulating a fumble. When are wide receivers ever facing the ball, right? When are they ever facing the running back? They've always got their back to them. So what you got to do with wide receivers, you got to holler ball, which everybody does when there's a fumble, and then they got to turn around and they got to find the damn thing. And if you go back and you look at our bowl victory over Eastern Michigan in the Camellia Bowl 2018, that very thing happened. And our wide receiver made a fumble recovery down the field. Had he not recovered it, we wouldn't have been able to kick the winning field goal to win it on the last play of the game, actually. And so ball security is always a part of it. Backfield, whatever you want to call, just the running backs and the quarterbacks, and then bringing the wide receivers over who are going to be pitchbacks. Just that relationship on a rag, right? Simulating the splits for the offensive line. Backfield was a big part of it. Half line is a huge, incredibly important drill. And half line's a great drill because you're not, it's not 11 on 11. It's low risk as far as injury is concerned. It does give certain kids a break when you're only going half line, and you can go rapid fire. That was the drill. Inside zone was our identity play. Half line was, I always called, our identity drill. Because we operated fast. We could script things that we needed to see based on our next opponent, and our kids operated at a fast pace. And then you go from half line to 11 on 11. Tuesdays in college, I'll just say Tuesdays in college, Mondays in high school, they were our emphasis was option, play action, pass. As far as team settings, option, play action, pass. So we just broke it down from individual drills to small group drill to small team drill to full team drill. And we would hit those most every day. But I never believed in staying in one place for a drill any longer than 10 minutes, or a certain number of plays, say 12 plays, because kids get bored. And so the coaches get bored. The only time that we would stay one place probably longer than that would be if we were actually scrimmaging or having some sort of team, offense against defense competition. But those would be the main elements of triple. Now, if we didn't want the offensive line there for a half line period, we would then go what we call perimeter, where everything was taken out. Half line, you still have the reads built in for the quarterback, so you might get a give in half line. Perimeter, everything's going out, so you got to be careful that you don't let your mesh mechanics suffer, because the quarterback knows he's taking it out. But that was a time for wide receivers, tight ends, backs, if they were involved in the blocking scheme, to make sure we were straight with what we were going to see on the perimeter that particular week. Perimeter drill doesn't have to be a really physical drill. It needs to be done full speed, but it's more of a mental drill, mental drill, assignment drill than anything else.
Okay. Now I got a couple more questions for you, Coach. First, how do you, because again, I've coached in a triple offense and I have a bunch of triple friends. How do you keep from getting too wordy in the gun? Like, obviously you do a lot, but how do you keep it from being too wordy, and for when you're sending in something, or because I've seen you a couple times, like there's all your stuff seems fairly verbiage wise as short as humanly possible. So how do you keep it from being too much or adding too much or getting too wordy as the game goes on?
Yeah. So the first thing, as far as getting too much, adding too much, we have something that we've lived by since Sam Houston, and that is mainly because of the option and the precision it takes. When we're talking about game planning, there is no addition without subtraction. So if somebody comes up with an idea, hey, let's look at this, or let's add this to the game plan, then we would ask, okay, what goes? Because you have a finite amount of time in practice every week, right? Okay, so you can't keep adding things, right? You can't, and if you're going to add something new, something's got to come out, or else you're not going to have enough time to do it. Then all of a sudden you become the jack of all trades and the masters of none. And so there was always that addition by subtraction. And then if we're going to add something, it would always be from the inside out, as opposed to grab bagging from what somebody saw the NFL do or somebody do in college. If it didn't fit our system, rarely did we go there. It was usually, how can we build, how can we complement what we've been doing? Self-scout is huge. Okay, self-scout is huge. You're still going to run inside zone and triple, right? Those are going to be the two base plays. So scouting how you how have you looked? What have you looked like over the past 3 or 4 weeks? What kind of motions, pre-snap presentations, personnel groupings have you used? You got to make yourself look different, so the defense is lining up soundly to different formations, different motions, what have you. But you're running the same stuff over and over and over and over and over and over again. They're trying to get lined up, and hopefully you can snap the ball before they get their cleats in the ground or eyes in the right place. And so that was a big part of keeping things concise yet familiar, or, but enough variety and enough familiarity for our kids to where it worked. We were very conscious of being too wordy. We got to the point at New Mexico, probably 2014, where we had to stop because we were getting that way. 2014, 2015, somewhere in there, we were getting that way. It was getting to the point where it was just like overwhelming, too many tags. So we found where we could consolidate, where we could make things more concise. And the big thing was between personnel groupings, 11 personnel, 20, 21 personnel in particular, could we call things basically the same? If you look at our 11 calls, the only thing that you'll hear different would be it's somehow, some way, we've got to get a wide receiver into the backfield to be the pitch back. But then the calls, as far as the plays were concerned, they're exactly the same. It's the same call. It's just different personnel doing it. And so when we started to consolidate and make things more concise and make personnel groupings kind of fit together, that was a big step for us. We signal things in. We signal, personnel grouping, formation, motion, if it's called for, and play. That's what we've signaled in forever. If anything became too wordy, we had a wristband. But we didn't have too many wristband calls. We really didn't. Tried to minimize the tags. Remember, when you're running triple, you're either going to have a tight end out in front, making things go, or you're going to have a back doing the exact same things that a tight end would be doing, leading the way. And so those calls can all be the same. It's just a matter of what personnel grouping are you in.
Yeah.
I hope that makes sense.
It does. It makes 100% sense. And that's, again, one of my things I'm looking at this off season is that. And now you mentioned right there the self-scouting and it leading to the presentations. Obviously you historically have given a lot of presentations. I mean, I think that's one of the things you kind of got known for was presentations. I mean, New Mexico, a lot of your 3 backfield different personnel, and then even at Georgia, and even when I watched some of the Grapevine stuff while prepping for this interview, I don't think I saw a back-to-back plays where I saw that even remotely the same formation.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what led to that being your philosophy of, or let me rephrase that. What that led it to your way of attacking people is, and how did you decide after you self-scouted, this is where I want to go with a backfield presentation or
the first thing is, if opposing defenses are lining up to 11 personnel, 21 personnel, 20 personnel, 12 personnel, 22 personnel, 30 personnel, which it wasn't out of the ordinary for us to carry all of those personnel groupings into a game. Okay, because once again, out of everything I just named, if we call 2021, 2021 is 2021. The rules are the same. The personnel may be different. The type of personnel may be different. But that's also where consolidating and getting familiar with the calls, helped a whole lot. And so I always felt like, 22 personnel to me, and I think any defensive coordinator will tell you, it creates real problems. It creates real problems because it creates extra gaps. It creates issues as far as run fits for safeties. And so when you're running triple, that's big time important. And you've got to spend time just lining up to 22 just to make sure. Okay, so if they're spending all that practice time just lining up and adjusting to motions and pre-snap presentations, they ain't spending time on dive quarterback pitch. They're not spending time on the squeeze technique. They're not spending time on the proper pursuit angle from the free safety as far as run support is concerned. And so that was a big reason we were going to try to have as many personnel groupings as possible, as many pre-snap presentations as workable as far as practice was concerned, for us to be as hard to defend as we could make it. But at the same time, like I just said, 3 different times, we're just running inside zone. We're running triple. We ran a hell of a lot more inside zone than we ever ran triple. But we were running triple presentation. So people couldn't tell if we were running triple or not. But, that quarterback, is a predetermined give a hell of a lot more than it was. So when you add up the number of times that we ran inside zone, predetermined give, and the number of times that we gave it on the triple, inside zone was by far and away the most run play. And to add something to that, when you're talking about practicing, so that means your offensive line 65, 70% of their time, they're running the same scheme.
Yeah.
2021 for us, 2021, 30-31 are exactly the same scheme for the offensive line. Exactly.
Coach. Now, I mean, kind of as we wrap this up, like, so you've hit on a lot of different things. Like, one of the things I like to ask experienced coaches is, what recommendations do you have for young coaches? And you can direct this as in general or to offensive coaches, however you want to address this. But what recommendations or suggestions or even advice would you give younger coaches as they come up in the profession and start coordinating or start becoming head coaches? You've experienced in both as they kind of go through things.
First thing I would say in today's society is be patient. And the reason I say that is, too often, and I've experienced this in high school and hiring guys, too often, the first question is, how fast can I move up? Well, hell, you haven't done anything yet. Let's worry about the work first, or where's my gear? What's my title? Can I have this title? Can I have that title? Well, how about we earn titles, and so I would say be patient. And I know that sounds like a guy who's been doing it for a long time, but, hiring coaches these days, or the mentality of coaches these days, it's not a whole lot different than players, right? I want it now. Parents, I want it now. I want his success now. Well, he's not ready to have success now. He's not good enough to have success now. So from a coaching standpoint, man, do everything you can to get around opportunities to learn. Get with older coaches that have been doing it for a while. Get with somebody that's considered an expert in whatever scheme they run. First off, decide what where are you comfortable? Where is your identity? What do you want your philosophy, offensive philosophy or defensive philosophy to be? And then gravitate towards those people who are like that. And work at it. When you go to clinics, don't go to clinics just to socialize. Socializing at clinics is huge, right? I enjoyed it as much as anybody. And that's a big part of coaching, is networking. But by the same token, it's become almost like, okay, this is why we're going to clinics now, is to socialize. You go to clinics to try to pick up just one day. If you can go visit a campus and watch somebody practice, and you can pick up one thing that makes you a better coach, man, it was worth the trip. But you got to work at it. You got to pay attention to that. And so I would say be intentional about, developing your own identity, intentional about developing, what do you want to, what do you want your offense to look like, your defense to look like? And man, go study tape. With all the technology these days, it is so easy to get tape. It's so easy to get tape. But the challenge is, not everybody has the attention span, or the focusing skills, to sit there and work at it, and, again, I don't mean to sound like an old dude. I am, but I don't mean to sound like, but man, I can remember just grinding, with older coaches and the things they would point out. I can remember as a young coach thinking, why is that important? Boy, I learned, I learned. And coaching is just like anything else, man. To be successful, you got to put in the work. It ain't just about how fancy is your gear, putting my cap on backwards and chest bumping and all that kind of stuff, man. It's work. So if you want to make a difference, you got to jump in there and you got to separate yourself from really most of the crowd these days.
Now, the last question I want to ask you, and then I'll do my wrap up afterwards, Coach. But because I love talking to coaches who've been through the option, not just recent, but like I said, you obviously cut your bones back and run the split back veer. And because I think perspective is everything. You mentioned how important your tight end was. Like if you were like to talk just general option football, like what keys or details would you recommend coaches starting out to focus on? Because I think every option coach has a different perspective on that, depending on who they work for and what they've experienced.
Right.
What kind of keys or things have you focused on, or like became really part of your attention to detail and your precision as you got through?
Right. The first thing I would say is you have to practice fast. Okay. You have to practice fast. And in order for you to practice fast, maybe the single toughest challenge for an option team is to get the scout team to practice fast and to get the scout team to give you precise looks. If you can get your scout team to give you precise looks and practice fast, you're way ahead of the game and you're way ahead of the opponent you're fixing to play. Now, what that means sometimes is coaches have to go play scout. Okay. And initially, that wasn't part of who I was as far as practice was concerned. I learned really through talking to the academies, the coaches of the academies. That can be a huge, huge benefit to have certain sessions like half line, like perimeter drill, where coaches played the scout team, because you knew you were going to get great looks out of the coaches, right? And then what that means is the coaches have to coach their players off of video. Okay. We can't necessarily stop and coach at that particular time, but that's okay. Because the benefits we got out of it outweighed not being able to coach. So I would say first, you have to practice fast. In order to practice fast, your scout team has to practice fast and be precise as well. The second thing is, don't get caught up with, do I have a quarterback that fits the mold? Right. We played with a guy named Austin Apodaca at the University of New Mexico. He was a transfer. He was with Mike Leach at Washington State. We ended up getting him as a bounce back junior college guy. And his strength was throwing the football. But he had a really good football IQ. He understood the triple. He understood what needed to be done. He worked at the mechanics. He got better at getting from point A to point B. And to me, that's the biggest evaluation for an option quarterback, is how fast can you get from the mesh to the option phase? How fast can you get from point A to point B? When you get to the option phase, if the option, if the option defender takes pitch, how fast can I stick my foot in the ground and get up the field and create separation? So I don't think you have to necessarily have or make a decision around the option based on, do I have a quarterback that fits the mold? You can have an average athlete, and Austin was better than an average athlete, but I'm saying you can play with an average athlete, just with the understanding that, again, you may not have as many explosives, but you're still forcing the defense to stop, put everything on the back burner, and make sure everything's responsible for that quarterback pitch. And let me tell you one more advantage for that too. You got to be willing, when you're running the option, to run triple, especially early in the season. Run it on 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9. Okay. You have to be willing to say, no matter what they're saying in the stands, when they see you running triple on 3rd and 9, because what's going to happen? You're going to put that on tape a couple of times early, and defensive coordinators are going to say, crap, we got to take our pressure package And we got to shrink it big time because there's no way in hell I can work dive quarterback pitch with all these pressure packages. So all of a sudden now what you see on third down from an offensive standpoint, from a pressure standpoint, shrinks big time. Okay. And that's to your advantage when it comes to preparing for an opponent. So it would be practicing fast, and then it would be quarterback. Don't talk yourself out of it. And then it would be, do I have somebody who fits the mold either as a tight end or a fullback type? And I'm talking about our style of triple as a tight end or a fullback type that can take on that cruiser responsibility, that cruiser role. Because like I said earlier, to me, after the quarterback, that cruiser is the most important player on offense. Now you got to have explosive backs. You got to have backs who can get out there and get a pitch relationship and all that. But as far as getting things started and making it go, he has to read things just like the quarterback does.
Yeah.
And so having somebody there, and we've had years where we've been better at that spot than others, and the better we are, it seems like the better our offense is. You know, he gives us more flexibility and variety. So those three things are the things that come to mind, I think, first, as far as the option is concerned. And then maybe I would say, don't talk yourself into, like we talked about earlier, don't talk yourself into this being a high risk offense. It's not. It's not a high risk offense. As a matter of fact, if you're smart in how you practice and you emphasize ball security properly and the kids buy into it, the opportunity for explosive plays far outweigh any risk of ball security.
Okay. Coaches, give Coach a follow on Twitter and social media and all that jazz, and like, share, subscribe, all that. Check out our sponsor, Coachpad, all that fun stuff. Other than that, coaches, thanks for watching, and that is in our episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast.